You're listening to the Piercing Wizard podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Ouellette. I'm a professional body piercer with 20 years experience. I travel around the world teaching technique and safety classes, and I'm a member of the Association of Professional Piercers. Listen in as I talk to my friends and colleagues about our industry so we can all stay sharp. Okay, so welcome back to the Piercing Wizard podcast. Also, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I can hear you too. You look very pretty, by the way.
Thank you. I'm wearing a Roadhouse t-shirt today.
Roadhouse. We may or may not have a video version of this for Patreon, but if not, just believe me when I say that Lola looks really cute in her Roadhouse t-shirt. So you're doing, this feels really weird, like interviewing you, like being able to see you. Is that weird?
Let's do this.
A little bit, yeah. Okay, so you have your education day coming up on Sunday, the 24th of January, 2021. You're going to be talking about wieners, Prince Albert piercings most specifically.
Yeah.
So why don't you do an intro for you if people don't already know who you are, and then maybe just talk about a couple of your ideas from the class and why you think it's important.
Okay, my name's Lola Slider. I'm a body piercer from Glasgow in Scotland. So at the moment, that means I'm an out of work body piercer because we're in lockdown again.
Yeah.
I own Forest Piercing. I'm an APP member. 5 years this year, which is exciting for me.
So did you get the new certificate?
No, well, I haven't
Not
had
yet.
any certificate through yet, but
Okay.
shipping mail stuff here.
It'll say Lola Slider is a 5-year member in good standing.
Well, I didn't know if it would because I've been a member for 5 years, but last year I had to like reapply. It's like when you reapply, but you're still a member and you never stop being a member. So I don't know if they're going to treat it like 5 consecutive years, which I think that they could. And if they don't, it would be like the time you told me that I could have a 5-timers jacket if I came on your show 5 times and you didn't. So if this turns out to be like that, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Difficult. These are unprecedented times, Lola. I can't go buying embroidered satin jackets all willy-nilly, but you'll get one eventually.
Okay, so I don't know. I mean, I'll be happy enough if it's just a regular certificate. I'll know that it's my 5th one, but still, it's still exciting for me. What was the question? Oh yeah, so I'm doing an education day with you on the 24th of January, 2021, and I think that we should just say 2021 as many times as possible because it's just sounds beautiful, and way better than any previous alternative that won't be mentioned. So on that day, you're going to be offering your nipple class, which is considerations for nipple piercings.
I'm not going to do the full like needle technique thing because I'm doing this as kind of like a bonus to supplement your class, but I'm also doing it to record to put on Patreon. And I don't really like to put a lot of like needle technique videos on Patreon because anybody could sign up and I wouldn't want to be irresponsible and share like how-to information with someone who's maybe not a professional piercer. So my class is going to be basically all the things that you would need to think about before a nipple piercing, like how to evaluate anatomy, how to talk to certain people if they've had any sort of alteration to their anatomy through surgery or hormone replacement therapy, talking about different aftercare issues. Inverted nipples would be part of the conversation. So I'm going to do all that stuff as maybe like I'm aiming for like a 45-minute presentation, and then I'll probably put that on Patreon.
But that's all really valuable information that's often a lot harder to get, like because there are classes you can take on bevel theory and you can do shadowing and, like you can get that hands-on experience, but it actually takes a lot longer to get the experience you need to learn about all different anatomy types.
Yeah.
I think that it's a super valuable class. I've taken your nipple class before and really felt that it benefited me. Like even at this point, there were little changes that I can make. And I get really excited about that stuff because it makes me feel like I'm still learning things, which is fun. I will say though, on one of the posts that you made, not on the class one, but I think just one of the times you posted, you said plus bonus nipple content by Ryan Ouellette. And part of me just hoped it would just be you like wearing tassels or something.
Just like trying to lick my own nipple. That's the bonus content. Well,
That
so
definitely be for Patreon.
for the PA part of it,
Mhm.
um, I feel like I have to step back a little bit and just point out the fact of how many conversations we've had involving foreskin.
It's gonna be my
Uh,
legacy. Like if I die tragically, that's gonna be the only thing people remember me for.
right.
That has to change.
Spoiler alert, I'm American, so I don't have foreskin. So I don't have a lot of like
Tell the world,
firsthand
why don't you?
what?
Tell the world, why don't you?
I mean, I don't think it's that shocking. But a lot of US piercers, they don't have any experience with it. Out of 20 years and however many dicks I've seen and pierced, let me add that as an amendment. How many dicks I've pierced, foreskin is like maybe 5 ever, like out of my whole career. So I think a piercer from Europe, UK, that deals with intact anatomy, natural anatomy, would probably have a lot of really useful information to share with, especially North American piercers.
Well, when the class first came up, I've been doing the class for 3 years, and each year I've tried to include more information in the class just from, like, that way when you teach a class, you almost think of things as you're teaching or once the class is over that would have been good to incorporate. So I think once you've done a class, it's easy to kind of add content to it a little bit. So it's the third kind of edition of the class. And the reason I started doing the class was because at the time, this would be 4 years ago, because I guess I spent about a year working on the class. I was doing a PA piercing, and my apprentice at the time was watching the piercing. And just like with any shadowing piercing, I was just talking through everything that was happening and explaining to the client and explaining to them what was going on. And just through that kind of organic conversation, it just kind of occurred to me like, there's actually quite a lot to say about PA piercings. Like, just there was no point that there wasn't something I could talk about that I was doing, manipulating tissue and marking and piercing technique. And it just, I'm one of those people that thinks, so, no one's going to want to see a class about this. Like, what do people want to learn from me about this? And I guess it was just a kind of organic moment where I thought there's probably quite a lot I could talk about this. So that's how the class got developed. And it wasn't until the first time I did the class and got feedback on it for the first time that I actually realized American piercers had that specific kind of knowledge gap. It didn't even occur to me because I
Yeah.
taught the class in the UK, and I wrote it for the UKPP seminar for a UK audience. So that wasn't even really the focus when the class was written. And then after getting that feedback, I then kind of leaned a little bit further into that element of it because I realized that was a knowledge gap. So
Right.
that's kind of how the class was developed.
Well, I, I've I've seen it. I think more than once, and I've been talking to you and watching you prepare for it, and it's a great class. I know I've said that one or two dozen times before on the show, but it's a great class, and uh, especially when it comes to foreskin. Like now, I can look at it differently. Like I from when you did your class that I took the first time. After that, I had a client who came in and they had intact anatomy, and I felt much more confident being able to service them, give them a piercing that they can be, happy and healthy with long term. And I was just really intimidated by it previously, so I thought it was really, really beneficial.
Thank you.
And you're also going to do the bonus class, predicting and preventing predatory behavior. I know we've talked about that already a bunch on this podcast, but I just want to point out to people that it's not about like a guy is harassing like a small woman. It's not about gender. It's about someone trying to exert a power dynamic on a piercer that they see as vulnerable, regardless of gender, regardless of experience level. Sometimes there are just people out there in the world who want to kind of create an unfair power dynamic, or they want to just be creepy or gross. And a lot of the things that uh, through my personal experience in life, I've learned to just kind of be like, well, I, I, I don't know if I put off a certain vibe or whatever, but like, I don't really have to deal with those interactions very frequently, but I know plenty of piercers who have, and a lot of them put them in a place where they almost feel like they are obligated to deal with someone so that they don't lose the client. And the way that you present your information is so smart and so helpful and so beneficial to people that they can see that it's like, well, you are offering a professional service and there is a certain kind of requirement for the client to respond as in a professional way as the client. So if they create that unprofessional scenario, how do you deal with that? How do you move on from that? What's appropriate and what's inappropriate? And it's a massively good class, especially for younger piercers who don't have a lot of experience performing intimate piercings. Like, I think that that bonus class is like equal to like is just as important as learning the techniques for the piercing.
Well, that's again the reason that I kind of came up with the supplement was when I did the very first version of the class. I didn't have a separate class called Predicting and Preventing Predatory Behavior. I just had kind of like a foreword almost for the PA class itself, where just, I did like a 10-minute introduction to the class, just going over some of the points I really wanted people to be aware of. Just before they even consider, like doing genital piercing or going back to doing genital piercing if they already offer it. And then again, it's just one of those subjects that I found that there was so much to talk about that just wasn't discussed in like a really frank and open and helpful way. So again, the next time that I did the class, there was a full, almost separate presentation that preceded it that needed more time. And then I think when I did it last April as well, that was probably the final version of the Predicting and Preventing Predatory Behavior supplement as kind of its own standalone class. And again, the genesis of that class was these were conversations that I did have with my apprentice at the time, introducing genital work and that kind of thing, because when I first started doing genital piercing, I was, 21, and I didn't have any of this information, and I didn't really have any resource for that information. So a lot of the situations that came up that were of a predatory nature really just put me on the back foot, and I just had to kind of deal with them, as and when they came up, and I didn't have any kind of a system in place. And there's a phrase that you use, I think, which is, if it's predictable, it's preventable. I'm not sure that
That's
you
way
really
too
said
smart.
that.
That's not something I've said.
You know what? It might have been you quoting Jeff.
You know what? That's probably
I,
it. If
I,
I've ever said anything that sounds smart, I'm probably quoting Jeff or you.
there is a phrase, if it's predictable, it's preventable. It's like a safety phrase. And I'm sure I've heard you say it, but if it's not your phrase, it could be Jeff's, it could be Brian's.
I'll
But
take credit for it.
yeah, it's someone's phrase, and it's a great phrase. And one of the things that I like to go into in the class, without obviously giving too much of that content away, is that the point of the class isn't to kind of accept or tolerate that behavior in any way. It's more to say that if there was an accident that was likely to take place in the studio, like a needle stick injury or a contamination incident, that is a predictable event. So you put a preventative measure in place for that event. Like you have something on paper, you discuss something with your coworkers, there's something that's in place so that if that thing happens, which is predictable, there's something there that's going to help you prevent it. And there's a system in place for if something does happen. Obviously, predatory behavior isn't the same as an accident because it's deliberate. But again, if it is something that you can predict, then it's something that you, in part, can at least try and prevent, which I think you owe to yourself or to your coworkers so that they're not just freely exposed to that behavior.
Anything else that creates a risk in the studio would probably have some sort of protocol or practice to minimize or eliminate that risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Needle sticks, handling contaminated trash or whatever. So why wouldn't you want the staff to be trained where it's like sometimes you're going to get messages from somebody that wants to ask creepy questions or, wants to, hey, do you have a female piercer? Like those kinds of things can just like instantly pop off a light bulb to be like, okay, I'm gonna handle your interaction in a certain way. So it's a really fantastic. It's really its own class, but it pairs so perfectly with the subject matter that it's really valuable for a lot of people.
I hope so.
Well, I think it's going to be great. To touch on it, if this is before January 24th, like at least a few days before January 24th, registration is still open. You can go to a couple different places. You can check out Lola's social media. You can go to Body Art Education by Ryan Ouellette on Facebook. There's an event page there that has the link for registration, explaining the content, explaining the schedule. You can just go to my website, precisionbodyarts.com/seminars. You can get the sign up sheet there. And when you sign up, that's basically just saying, this is my name and my contact info. I want to take the class. And then you're going to need to verify, because I think anything that I teach that involves how to push a needle through somebody, same thing for you. We really want to just verify that you're working in a shop. I don't necessarily care how much experience you have. If you're 6 months in or 16 years in, I just want to know that you are in a shop, you have access to some sort of level of safety equipment, sterilization equipment, that you've had some sort of level of training. I'm completely sympathetic, empathetic, understanding of people, vastly different experience levels, but I think the information is really important. But I think the line for me is, you have to be a professional of some capacity. You can't just be an enthusiast that wants to get into piercing, or you're just into it because you like dicks or whatever. Like, you need to be a professional piercer of some experience level to register. But you'll need to verify your registration, meaning you need to email some stuff to Lola, and it can be really anything. It can be a cell phone picture of your license, or a picture of your business card that shows that you work in a shop, or a screen cap from a studio's social media listing you as a piercer, or their website listing you as a piercer, or just the link to your membership on the UK APP website, the APP website, something like that. You just need to show something that says that you're a professional, but we're very loose on what the something can be. So it's not difficult. Once you verify, you get a PayPal invoice and you pay, and then that's it. And then you get the invite for the class.
For me as well, like I'm also aware that this past year an awful lot of people lost their jobs.
Mm.
You know, so for me, verification, as long as it's documentation for within the last 12 months, I would be happy to accept that, you know, because a
Sure.
lot of people are between jobs right now.
Yeah,
Um,
you don't stop being a piercer just because you're out of
yeah,
work.
exactly. Like a lot of piercers are going to be out of work for, you know, 6 months and beyond.
Yeah.
Licenses can lapse, insurance can lapse in that time, and you're not required to renew those documents until the shop can open again,
Mm-hmm.
which during obviously a lockdown situation um, is money that could be better spent on things like rent. You know, so there are
Yeah.
situations right now where people are going to lapse in those things. But you know, as long as they can document and verify, whether it's through like a work feed or you know, like you say, business cards or any kind of work verification that's recent or from within the last 12 months, then that would be fine.
I want to clarify the schedule, because sometimes even when I read it, it seems a little bit wacky. The main focus of the day is Lola's class. Like, this is Lola's class. I'm offering my presentation as like a warm up, like opening band bonus, because again, a lot of people are out of work. If people are paying for a class, I want them to get as much out of the day as possible. So 100% of the funds are going to Lola. You know, you're out of work right now. You've had a really rough go of it with UK lockdowns, Scotland lockdowns. So 100% of the money goes to Lola. None of it goes to me. My business is still open. So I wanted to just kind of add my class on as a bonus, something that I can do to give the attendees just a little bit of an extra thing. And then you know, I'll record it and stick it on Patreon for those people. But um anyway, the schedule. Lola's class, which is the main event, is going to start at 1 o'clock Eastern US time, which will be 6 o'clock at night UK time. So whatever region you're in, whether it's West Coast US or somewhere in Europe or wherever, just check the local time zones. But it'll be 1 o'clock Eastern US time, 6 o'clock PM British time, and that's going to be for Lola's presentations. But before that, I'm going to do my opener, and that's going to be at 2 hours before Lola starts, basically. So 11 o'clock Eastern US, which will be 4 o'clock PM British time. I'm going to do my presentation of about 45 minutes, and then we're going to take maybe an hour break in between. So if there's any last minute questions, or if somebody is rushing to pay a last minute invoice for Lola's class or something like that. So on Sunday, the 24th, I'll start at 11 o'clock Eastern US time. Check your own local time in your area. Google it if you need to. I'm going to go for about 45 minutes. and then maybe chit chat a little bit, and then we're going to have an hour off. When you register, you're going to get 2 separate links. You'll get the link from my bonus class. If you want to take it, take it. Some people have already taken my full nipple class. The people who take online education, I see a lot of similar names for your classes and my classes. So they might have already seen or heard my nipple information. So if you don't want to take it, you don't have to worry about that. You could just take Lola's, the main event kind of thing, but you'll get 2 separate invites, one for Lola's part and one for my part. But sign up for it. You have to sign up for Lola's class to get the invite for my class. Sorry, but supporting my woman. Is there anything else you want to talk about that? Or do you want to get into I got a couple little like short subjects.
Okay.
Anything else you want to touch on for DINK related information first? No?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. You're thinking of the wrong body part. All right. So one thing is I've been watching what you've been doing to stay productive in this lockdown. And I think a lot of it is trying to inspire other piercers who might be in kind of the same situation. You know, you're a big role model to me. I see how you interact. Like, I know the personal Lola, and I know that sometimes your energy is sapped because you're constantly having to give your energy to clients or other industry related things, and you still put all this work out there to try to help and inspire other people, even when you know you're probably a little bit bummed out. But I think one great thing that you do with your lockdowns is you set boundaries for your mental health, disabling the messaging on social media and trying to drive them towards just go to the website or just email me and I'll respond to you like during business hours. I think that's a great thing for people who are kind of in similar situations, whether you're in California or whether you're in Brighton or whatever, you know, like you need to realize that like you shouldn't be on 24/7. So what do you think about setting your boundaries for your own mental health professionally?
Well, I would say that it's something that I'm trying to do, but like a lot of people, I haven't perfected it. I always want to be really clear that a lot of the time when I try and give people inspirational advice on the internet, I've not like mastered that advice. It's just a good idea. It's what I'm also trying to do. So like I'm not perfect at doing it. The first lockdown was really, really rough for me. I definitely struggled with it a lot more because my shop had only been open for 3 months. And I think during the first lockdown, everyone just kind of, you know, from every other studio, well, for most other studios, not every studio, but most studios literally just downed tools, went home, and just kind of stopped answering messages and stopped answering emails.
Yeah.
Because I got a huge amount of messages from people just saying, hi, I'm not your customer, but I can't get in touch with my person. What do I do about this?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, as a brand new business, like I have to take every opportunity I can to try and you know, promote myself and promote safe piercing, and you know, like hope that by doing that I can get more work and more clients. And that's been something that's been really effective for me. But even then, like most normal, reasonable people aren't going to be upset that you don't reply to them at 10 o'clock at night. You know, they're just not. And that's the problem, is you kind of set yourself an impossible standard when all of your devices and all of your accounts and all of your inboxes are all synced to one device, which is what I had the biggest problem with. And then obviously there was another lockdown and now this lockdown. And I think by the third time, I'm finally getting a better balance of what I can manage. I tried to turn off some of my boxes, but actually I couldn't find out how to. I don't know if I'm not doing it right or if it just can't be done. But I redirected all of the traffic to my shop email address, which I check either every day or every other day. I try to be on it pretty regularly. I set up automatic reminders on any platform that I could, just telling people, you know, this inbox isn't currently manned. Redirect all of your mail to this, you know, one inbox. And it kind of means that, you know, when we're in lockdown, we really rely on technology to be our contact with the outside world, especially if you live alone. And that means you can at least create a little bit of breathing space where you can pick up your phone without there necessarily being just like this waterfall of notifications and messages from clients, and not just from clients, but from, you know, businesses and, you know, utility companies and all this kind of stuff you're having to deal with. And it really does fill you with a lot of anxiety when you have to like pick up your phone and see that. So for this lockdown, I made a point of logging out of all of my email addresses other than my one kind of private email. Um, I redirected all of the traffic to my shop's email address, which I can log in and out of. So I kind of did those things. And that's been a really big help. I haven't noticed it, but I've definitely noticed less kind of just on the spot moments of panic when I like refresh my inbox in my Gmail without thinking about it. Because in the other lockdowns I would do that and then there would suddenly be this wave of stuff that I had to do, but I also don't have the power to fix any of these problems right now. And you can't unsee something once you've seen it, so there's no way to do that thing where you're like, I'll deal with it during sensible hours. So the only way to kind of deal with it is to like make it so you can't see it, which can seem quite extreme, like logging out of everything, but it's like it's extreme times. Like you have to physically log out of everything, uninstall things, remove things. And I've definitely noticed there have been less times I've been like scared to pick up my phone, or like just flying from like if you're like a 2 or 3 out of 10 on the stress scale or whatever, just all of a sudden going through the roof because you see all of this stuff you have to deal with
Mhm.
whilst the world's on fire. That's been a big help for me.
Well, you've definitely given me ideas. Now I try to basically just I'll pause all the apps on my phone when I'm off business hours. I try to focus on 9 to 5 is my goal. I'm sure every now and then I'll answer an email or something at night or whatever, but um, I still almost every day I'll get that random message at like 11:30 at night, be like, hey, I have this like this unimportant question. Not to say that it's like in dismissively, I'm not trying to say it's like dismissively unimportant, but it's like it doesn't need to be answered at
Not urgent.
11:35 at night.
Mm.
It can wait until the next morning. So that's what I'm trying to do to set boundaries for myself, because I'm just so worn down by feeling like I have to work a lot harder for a lot less, like a lot of people. And it's like, well, when do I get to keep some of that energy for myself? And I know that some people they get a bug and they're like, I'm really motivated and excited to do this thing, and I just want this one answer. And you kind of feel like that answer will be the gateway for you making money. Like, I need to answer this right now, and then the person will book an appointment and I'll get money off of it or something. But you don't have to get that instant dopamine fix. It can wait until office hours. Everybody in the world is used to that. If you send a business a message at 11:30 at night, think of when you're realistically going to get an answer. Like, really good example is if I ask a body jewelry quote to a company, I'm like, hey, I need a price on this piece. And I send that like at Friday night at 7 o'clock. Like, I'm not going to hear back until sometime Monday morning. And that's perfectly fine and perfectly acceptable. And that's like still high quality customer service because it's business hours. They're not going to create the unrealistic standard where I'm going to get a reply at 3 in the morning on Saturday.
I think an important thing to be aware of is the fact that pretty much industry wide, everybody has been affected really, really badly by the pandemic. And something that I noticed, I haven't been able to work very much. I was able to work for about 10 days in December, I think, literally in between two lockdowns. And and I kind of, one of my only contacts with the outside world, like with just the community that I live in, is with my customers. Because I'm a bit of a hermit anyway. And, so like getting a feel for how they're feeling. And one thing that I noticed was that a lot of clients who had been able to keep working kind of had this sense of guilt that they'd been able to keep working while other people weren't able to work. And,
Sure.
they would kind of say some things about the lockdown and then be like, oh, it's not been that bad for me, because they knew that I'd been out of work. And at times like that, I always just felt the need to be like, you don't have to apologize for being, depressed or run down during a pandemic just because
Mhm.
somebody else's situation may be in a way worse than your situation. So I think that, it's important to just be aware it's not like a competition for who's the most miserable. Like, I mean,
I,
like,
I've felt that in a very deep way,
yeah,
because you've seen that there are times where I come home from work and I'm bummed out, and then you're bummed out for whatever various reason, and we're not trying to like out sad each other. We're just expressing so that we can get some of that sadness out and then move on with our day together. Like, nobody is all smiles right now. Nobody is living it up. People are surviving, maybe the occasional person is thriving, but I think even if someone seems like they're thriving online, they're probably still struggling a little bit personally. They're probably just better at like maintaining the illusion than I
Yeah,
am.
it's just something that I try and be really mindful of, because obviously being out of work for so long, and in Scotland there are all different kinds of guidelines, in terms of piercing as there are in other parts of the UK, and it's just what I've been able to do has been really, really squeezed. And it would be so easy to just be like, resentful and jealous and angry at studios that have been able to keep working. And I think it's just really, really important to not let yourself fall down that hole.
Yeah.
Because for one, it doesn't help you in any way, it doesn't help the community in any way. And it's also inaccurate. Like studios that have had to stay open, although that things might not be as bad in a financial sense, there's also the possibility they could be, because those businesses can't qualify for any kind of support because they're still open. They're still having to pay out all of their expenditure like they normally would, but the amount of appointments they can do has maybe been cut in half or maybe down to a third. They're still all like yourself, you're having to deal with clients in massively different circumstances, in terms of how you see them through the appointment process. And a lot of people are unhappy with that. And even though it's not your fault and you're doing everything for the right reasons and in accordance with state and local laws, you're the person that has to be face to face with that customer dissatisfaction.
Hmm.
So you're going from having, normal days at work with peaks and troughs to having, every single day at work, maybe every second customer is more challenging and maybe puts some of that unhappiness on you, and then you have to carry that around.
Yeah.
So I think that it's just important to be aware that you shouldn't feel, piercers that have been able to keep working, I don't think that they should have to feel guilt that other people can't work. Like they're entitled to their feelings, they're entitled to suffer, like the stress and anxiety of being in a pandemic just the same as everybody else. Like you don't win a prize for being out of work the longest. I think if he could,
You'd
I'm not
win.
sure he would be winning. I was thinking, I was going to say like,
You know
I'm
what?
not
No,
up
I think
there.
some piercers in California would
I
win.
think that's what I was going to say. I think California has been like the, they're definitely in the lead of like the misery Olympics for, like not being able to pierce. But I think that I'm like, I maybe get a podium.
Yeah.
Maybe like,
No, you're a strong contender. You're a
yeah,
strong contender. Keep training hard.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I so a big thing that I've noticed, particularly with your experiences through lockdowns, is how much work goes into not working. Like
It's crazy.
it's like a full-time job not being able to do your job. Like you're constantly having to like grind, hustle, whatever term you want to use. Like you have to you're doing the web shop, and you're constantly trying to tweak your website to put more information there. You're working you worked on all those like infographics for your website that like really beautifully and simply explain things about aftercare and troubleshooting. I watched you make your aftercare pamphlet and new cards and stickers and all those things, but I'm also watching you do all your work for the UK APP, write classes, teach classes, do all this stuff. And it's like, I think a lot of us think like, lockdown should be us just sitting around in our underwear eating like snacks all day, which like, honestly, you do, but still, while you're doing it, you're multitasking and doing like 6 jobs at once. So,
Well, it becomes a lot harder to deal with things like bills when you don't have any source of income. And unfortunately,
really, what could you explain why?
yeah, like that's why it's, almost when things go into lockdown, that's when you actually really have to go to work, because every minute of every day is spent like trying to figure out how you're possibly going to like keep a business.
Yeah.
Like there are still uh, massive gaps in funding and in support. Where I'm located, if you qualify for funding and support, it's paid in arrears, which basically means you have to get into the debt first. So every single month you have to go through this. And, 10 months into a pandemic, that's exhausting. Because it's not, you have to keep reapplying. It doesn't just, roll over. It's not like it's something that they seem to keep a track of, which you would think again at this point would be happening. And every time new funding and new support becomes available, there are also new caveats, new reasons that you might not be able to get it, new limits on what you can get. So it's not just like you can just sit back and think, well, I'm just gonna, tighten my belt and wait it out. Every month you're in a situation where there may not be help and support. You have to wait till you owe all of that money and then find out. So it's like, it's pretty impossible to relax under those conditions. During the first lockdown, I'm sure I already said on the podcast, I had to go for 3 months just not having any money to pay rent on my flat, on my studio. There was just none. It took months and months and months to try and get any kind of support. And every day, because you're not doing anything, you're working out in your head how much more money in debt you're getting into every day. And it's like, you can't help. It's so hard to not think in those terms. It's incredibly challenging to get to a point where you can turn that off. And again, 3 lockdowns in, I'm getting a little bit better at it because I'm just trying to tell myself, like, somehow I'm still here. So somehow I'm going to get there. But it's really draining, just honestly not knowing. So that's why it's not the same. Again, if you've been at work and you're thinking, oh, well, what I would give to just be sat at home right now, it's really, really not fun.
Mm-mm. I had about a 2-month closure from my lockdown. And I think that early into it, I did see it as kind of like a terrifying vacation, but my lockdown ended. I went back to work. My work changed somewhat dramatically, but I was still working. And now I've settled into that new pattern at work where I'm putting in a lot more hours, and it's a lot more customer service labor intensive, not in a negative way, but the whole cradle to the grave, one person at a time appointment thing. But like I wouldn't want to have to deal with another lockdown. Like, I think that's terrifying for a lot of business owners, and some of the business owners who have just, their new normal is dealing with lockdowns. Like, they're strong people.
I think one of the things that you had to adapt to as well was unlike me just being on my own, you have a whole family of staff you have to care for and consider for as well.
That's why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough where I'm at a point where if I had to take some time off, forced or chosen, I wouldn't have to worry, panic too much. But like, I have staff who have kids and families, and they have their own rents and they have their own stuff. So it's like, I have to make sure that the business is viable for them. Even if I don't make any profit at all, I have to make sure that my obligations are met for my staff. And I'm not saying that in a negative. I'm saying that as a very positive. Like, I love being able to help offer some stability with people that I care about, but it's so much pressure worrying about, well, what happens if we are pushed into another lockdown? Like, what do I do? What do we do? And the people who have to live with that as a reality, I really applaud you, and know that like people like me and Lola are thinking about you a lot.
Yeah, that the community's been affected in so many negative ways. I just think it's important to be aware that, like, it's not like a contest for who has it the worst. Like, we're all struggling really badly right now.
We all
And
have it the worst together.
yeah, well, I just think it's important to be aware that, like, you shouldn't also have to deal with like guilt for your anxiety on top of your anxiety. Like, just feel however it is that you're feeling. It's insane to think that you should feel guilty about having to live and work during a global pandemic. Like,
Yeah.
this is a massively traumatic event.
Yeah. You made a really nice video for social media where you were kind of educating clients to how to best take care of their piercings during a lockdown. And I really like that the biggest influence was like, just don't mess with your piercings right now. Just don't mess with your piercings
Yeah,
right now. So
that's something
what
I've
put that
learned.
in your mind?
Well, that was something that I've learned from the last 2 lockdowns. Again, I'm getting better at getting locked down, so at least that's something that's improved over the past 10 months. A lot of the problems that I was having with people, sending me emergency messages and being like, I'm having this problem and it needs to be fixed now, which are often, the most stressful for me, because it's like, I still can't do anything. And it just makes me feel like such a failure as a provider of piercing services when you know that you have a client that's in trouble. and you literally can't do anything because most of what we do is like hands-on practical assistance. And then you fall into that problem of, well, I could try and explain to them how they could maybe do this or that at home, and then you're like, in a way that can be more dangerous depending on what the situation is. So I really wanted to just make sure there was some information out there available to clients to try and be a bit more preventative. We spend a lot of time, I think, focusing on how do we treat this, how do we treat that, what do you recommend in this situation, and we don't really spend a lot of time often promoting how not to get in those situations, like for events like lockdown where support isn't available in any kind of physical capacity. And a lot of the kind of problems that I had in crisis from customers were things that wouldn't have happened if they'd have just left the piercing as it was and not done a particular thing to it. So
what's
really
the most common thing that you see come up with people? For me, it's like I had to take it out for a medical reason and now I can't get my jewelry back in. But what are you seeing most frequently?
It varies, but at the moment, it's really just things like complete random spot inflammation where something is totally fine. And I actually had this with my dot piercing the other day, and I sent you I don't know if I sent you a picture or showed you a picture, like my dot piercing, which is years old, just got really swollen for no apparent reason at all. And it's just one of those things. And that's one of the things that I mentioned in the video, is that, your piercings still live in your skin, and your skin reacts to its surroundings and, your diet and what it's exposed to. So like, there's still every possibility that years into having a piercing, it could just balloon up one day for no reason. So I really wanted to include kind of what to do in that situation and what can cause some of those things. And one of the biggest things, I think, is just literally the sudden, rapid change of circumstances that is going into lockdown. Like everything from your diet, your schedule, your sleep patterns, how much water you drink, how often you shower, when you shower, all of that stuff pretty much.
Wait, you're supposed to shower?
At least once a week, yes.
Okay.
All of that stuff just gets the brakes slammed on it, and you just do something completely different because you're like, right, back into lockdown now. So everything in your routine suddenly crashes to a halt, which is obviously going to cause your skin to react in a very different way. And that's also not even mentioning like the massive rise in stress and anxiety, which is like obviously well known to cause various things to flare up, underlying health conditions and that kind of thing. So like, I just think that it's important for people to be aware of those risks and to try and prevent those things from happening by taking, good care of themselves and their piercings wherever they can. Unfortunately,
and to realize that if they need help, there might not be any help available.
Well, one of the things I've been trying to educate customers on as well is when to know when to seek medical assistance, because sometimes people are just looking for a bit of reassurance, and you can say, why don't you send a picture, and I'll say, look, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, but why don't I take a look? Because sometimes a piercing kind of looks okay, it just looks a little bit angry. And I'll say to them, here are some of the things to look out for that could be indicative of a more serious problem. I keep them on my website all the time, because I also don't want people going to accident and emergency right now when they don't need to in the middle of a COVID pandemic, which obviously puts a burden on those services and puts them more at risk. So I wouldn't ever take on the role of telling a client if I thought that they had an infection, because my opinion doesn't matter, because I'm not a medical professional, but I can educate them as to what the risks of infection look like, or sorry, what the signs of infection look like, beyond your piercing just being a bit angry for a day, because it's been slept on. And I can tell them, what those symptoms look like, what they feel like, what the non-emergency medical number they can call is, so that they can actually call and speak to a medical professional who can assist them over the phone, and let them know if they should go and see a general practitioner or not. So I wouldn't ever take on the role of telling a customer whether or not they should seek medical advice. But I like to make sure they have all of that information, what to look out for, who to call, like when they should call, which, to be honest, the answer is anytime they feel like they need to, like anytime they feel that there is an actual risk of infection occurring at the piercing site, here's who they can call and here's what they can do, because there's nothing that I can do. And
well, even more than that,
yeah,
it's the people that are just like, oh, I just wanted to try some new jewelry in a new spot and now I can't get it in. It's like, sorry, like no matter how much you want me to just just, it'll only take a second. I just need you to, it's like, I can't legally do that if I'm in lockdown.
Yeah,
Sorry, you're on your own.
it is tough.
So let me ask you this. What would be the more dangerous thing for someone to do during lockdown? Try to install a tight fitting seam ring in their nostril piercing, or give themselves bangs?
I think it's hard to say because you see, we're wearing face masks right now. So if you mess up your face, you can still wear a face mask. If you mess up your bangs, you're really stuck with that
Yeah.
for a really long time. So
um, what else do I have for notes? When you made that video, did you record that direct to Instagram, or did you record that on your phone and put it on Instagram?
no, I just recorded it on my phone and put it on Instagram.
Can you email me? Would you be cool if I put that at the end of this podcast?
I guess if you want to, as long
Okay.
as you include all of the soppy stuff about being supportive.
I want to include the whole thing because I think it's really inspiring. Like, someone like me, I can talk about how I feel bad for people in lockdown, but I think it carries a lot more weight when it's someone who's right there with them. Like me, I have restrictions on what I'm doing, but I'm still open. But you are, it's a completely different reality. Just being told repeatedly, like, just go home, just go home. You don't need to make a living. It's like, so I want to share the whole thing. And if you're okay with that, I would like to put it at the end of this podcast.
Yeah, I can send that to you. I'm think that it came out okay. I just
I
took
think
the one video of it because uh, it was getting dark at the time, and that way where you're like, if I don't get this, I'm not going to get it. So I think there's a couple of stars and stuff in it, but otherwise, I think it was fine.
I think you nailed it. You did great. Uh, do you want to talk about any of the work you've been doing with UKAPP, or would that be like, that would be a whole episode in its own?
Well, at the moment, I'm just kind of in the middle of some stuff that's going on. So there's not really anything to kind of like
Update.
announce or talk about, but we are in the middle of an election at the moment, where we've had nominations confirmed, and soon members are going to be voting on who they'd like to take the seats that are empty on the board of directors, which is all like really exciting for me because it's the first kind of election that I've been directly involved in. Like being the president of the organization, and it's hard because there is a lot of stuff that goes on that like you can't share and you can't talk about publicly,
Sure.
just because it's an unfinished kind of stage. It's not information that's ready to be presented. But this past 6 months, especially, like the board has really made some pretty radical changes and has been completely overhauling how it communicates with members. Like how it provides them with information, and just really trying to do some work to increase the levels of transparency within the organization and increase member participation, or at least raise awareness of how members can participate and what they can actually do to be active in the organization. And hopefully that's something that's going to continue throughout 2021 as a theme, is to just get more member participation with more things, because we are our members basically. So
Well,
like if there are any members that are listening, just be aware, even though it's been a really dark year, and there's been a lot of stuff that's had to be cancelled and postponed, we're still here, and we're still working and trying to make it so that the organization can still be improved going
that's great.
forward.
Any organization, the strength of an organization is its membership. So it's great to have elections and to bring in new blood, new help. But yeah, increasing the transparency of communication between membership and a board. And I always just want to emphasize, whether it's UKAPP or APP or any of the other organizations around the world, the best way for you to strengthen that organization, or if you say, like, I wish the organization would be this or would do this, the best way to make that a reality is to get involved, become a member, volunteer, run for office, and just get involved with it, because organizations, just like you said, they are their membership.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only here on the board of directors as in the UKPP because I was a member.
Hmm.
Um, you know, like I I think that just removing any kind of preconception that, you know, any member couldn't be on the board is really, really important, because it's available to anybody that's willing to do the work, and that um, you know, has the ability to contribute as a board member, and represent the membership.
Yeah, especially with a young organization like the UKAPP. If you look back at the APP
Yeah,
in the US, you know, especially, well, starting from the US and growing international, the organization early on needed its members to step up and volunteer and say, like, I want to help grow the organization, grow conference, you know, grow the documents that we make and put out into the world for the industry. And you know, the APP had all these leaps and bounds, starting off with just a handful of members and then growing into dozens and then hundreds, and now hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, including all these international members, and seeing what's happened with conference and the material, training material and policies that they put out into the world, and seeing the positive impact on the industry. Um, if you want to see that in the UK, it's up to, I think, membership, and it's up to piercers who care
yeah,
enough to become a member in their local organization. Become a member of the APP also. That's great, but if you're a UK piercer, I would really say support the UK APP, and make a stronger organization for your country, your city, and your clientele.
I think if there was one thing that I could ask people to, you know, like keep in mind if there's anything they're ever not happy with, is just to kind of switch out and rearrange like a couple of words in their heads. And so often when there's something that we're not happy with, you know, we'll think, why don't we have this? You know, when you could say, we don't have this, what can I do to make it so that we do?
Mhm.
You know, so if there's a problem, if there's something that we could be doing differently or better, I think trying to be, you know, the person that gets that moving forward is is a lot better than adopting a kind of confrontational attitude,
Sure.
as well, why isn't this happening? Well, let's, you know, let's make it happen. Like let's figure out a plan and do it.
Mhm. You also have to be realistic, and realize that when people say, like, the board, whether it's APP, UK APP, or whatever, you're talking about body piercers who are volunteering what little time and energy they have left, when they might be like yourself, or like Becky and Pablo in the States, is like, you're dealing with just trying to maintain your business and make sure that that goes on, or to figure out where your rent's going to come from next month, or whatever. So um, be a little bit soft on how you, like, demand things to an organization. Like, the best way to do it is say, like, just like you said, what can I do to help achieve this goal, rather than saying, like, you know, this organization hasn't achieved my goal yet, but I'm not willing to help or even join the organization.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't ever expect members of the organization to apologize for demanding that it's better. You know, like they have every right to do that. But, you know, just be aware I'm a member of the organization too. I was before I was on the board. I'll be a member when I'm not on the board anymore. You know, post pandemic willing. Um, so, you know, I would like to see a lot more member participation and interaction. And I'm going to try and do everything that I can. And I've been trying to do everything that I can, you know, the last 6 months, especially with the free time that I have been given, to try and facilitate that. So that's something that I'm really, really aware of at the moment, is I want to kind of bridge those gaps of communication as much as possible.
That's great. Um, so I have all that stuff, uh, my notes. That's basically everything that I had. But I had one additional subject, and I don't know if you want to just try to tackle it quickly, or if, when I say it, if you feel like it's just too big of a thing to tackle, maybe we'll do that on our next episode. But I got a message from a piercer in the States named James Stampfly. So hi, James. Shout out to you. And he was just asking about pay
These
scale.
aren't anonymous questions, are they?
What? Sorry?
These aren't anonymous questions, are
Well, not
they?
anymore. um, so, but he brought up a good suggestion for talking about how piercers are paid and pay scales, not their specific pay rates. But I don't know if that's too deep of a subject to go into, but really just like, does somebody get paid hourly? Does somebody get paid commission? If you're setting up a new business with other piercers, like what would be the fair, reasonable, or like achievable way to pay them? Do you have any like thoughts on that? Like quick or long form? I mean, not longer than 5 minutes form, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I guess the off the top of my head, the answer would be both. Piercers get paid on commission. They can also get paid a daily wage. They can also get paid an hourly wage. Um, so piercers can get paid all of those different ways.
Well, I know I know all things are possible through Christ, but like like what's your opinion on things that are most like what have you experienced working for other people in the past? Like how have you wanted to get paid, and how did you get paid?
Well, for the longest time, when I worked in my previous job, I was there for about 9 solid years, and I always worked just on a percentage, like a tattooer. And that was the only way that I knew how to work. And I was very happy working that way. But for some people, I'm not sure if it was yourself I was talking to about this, but for some studios where there's multiple piercers, that can create a very competitive atmosphere because all of a sudden you're competing for work because you're getting paid on commission. So, like depending on the studio environment and the work it is you're doing, like it may be better to just have all of your piercers on a salary or on an hourly wage. But, if they're on an hourly wage, are they getting set contracted hours, or are they on, the dreaded 0 hour contract, which I would really hope would not be the case. If you're on a 0 hour contract, you should really just be on a percentage. But anyway, I digress. Part of me doesn't know if it should be a longer episode because I feel like so much of it is just your personal situation. I
Yeah,
think it's up to
right.
yourself as a self-employed person, basically, to try and find a situation that works for you. I think studios have every right to set those terms, and you have every right to reject them if you're not happy with them. I think the most important thing is having communication and honesty and establishing a dialogue straight away where you can say, what is the pay system like? Is there room to negotiate at, every 6 months, every 12 months, and establish all of that stuff ahead of time?
Right.
Because what you don't want to find yourself in a situation is where you've been in a job for 4 years, you've never had a raise, you've never had your pay situation change, and you don't really know how to go about broaching the issue because there's never been even a conversation about it. And I think that talking about money, at least over here, I don't know what it's like over there, is still so taboo that like young people, would I think really, even people that are more mature might really struggle to just say, can we have a conversation about this?
Mhm.
Are my wages going to be paid this way or this way? Is there going to be increases for inflation and that kind of thing? That's just a conversation that so many people that are excited to get a new job or get offered a new job won't think to have. So,
Or
um,
even just to get maybe their first opportunity to work as a professional piercer, they might just be like, oh, okay, I'll work for anything you're willing to pay me.
yeah, starting out, most of us are, going to have to start out in a situation that's not going to be our ultimate and our ideal and our finished kind of goal. So, that's a different thing. Although minimum standards should obviously apply for employees' rights and working conditions and that kind of thing. Um, like for example, if you are getting paid, you over here it's called there's the minimum wage and then there's the living wage.
Mhm.
Minimum wage being the legal hourly amount you're required to pay, and then the living wage is like a kind of voluntary minimum that you can pay someone to make sure they're getting a bit more fair value for their work, and then obviously you can go up from there. But I don't know. I think the most important thing is to work out first what you need to make. Like, what are my expenses going to be? What do I actually need to live and live comfortably where all of my bills are covered? And if at the end of the day the job doesn't meet those needs, it's kind of a moot point, really. Like if you're already armed with that information, it's a lot easier to go into that conversation and say, well, look, I can't take this job because all of my bills and my situation means that it's literally not going to be worth it for me. And then maybe that can allow the conversation to just grow and expand a little bit to say, well, what do you need? What can we do to make this work? Because I think if somebody really wants you to work for them, then they're going to want to try and accommodate your needs and make sure that you're happy. I mean, who would want to have someone working for them that was really struggling to make ends meet,
Right. A thing that I had to learn along the way. I worked by myself for years. Um, uh, no counter person, no other piercers or whatever. So when I started bringing in other staff, I really had to learn how to pay them and pay them fairly. Not to say that I wasn't paying them fairly, but I had to learn a way that was viable for me as a business owner, but would still show that like I appreciate my staff as professionals and I value what they bring to the business. For a while, I did a percentage. I did like a commission. And the problem that I ran into was that there were two people who influenced me in a way, one negatively and one that uh, it wasn't a negative, but like I had to use it as a learning experience. I brought in a guest piercer once who had like worked in plenty of other shops that I knew and respected. So I was like, oh, well, obviously, like they're not going to screw me over because they worked for A, B, and C shops that I know, whatever. They came in, and since it was commission, at the time, I was like, okay, you get this commission and you get a little bit of a commission bump if you can sell the gold, because it's like, yeah, I want to give people an incentive. But this person twisted the commission system where all they did was they like kind of gave the hard sell to clients and like pushed gold on them. And
Yeah.
I came back and I was only gone for about 5 days. And when I came back, the majority of piercings they did were with gold and they had some really high sales. And I was like, this is amazing. And I cut them a commission check. They went off on their way. They cashed my commission check. And then I spent the next 2 weeks dealing with all these clients coming back who had just gotten gold jewelry that was completely inappropriate for the area. And the guest piercer just like milked my system to get more money for them without caring at all about
Mhm.
the satisfaction and long-term health of my clients. And I was so offended by that. And then come to find out that like they burned plenty of those other studios the same way, but they were like a traveling carny or something like that, where nobody caught on until it was too late. There was that. And then I had another piercer who was a staff piercer for a while, like, you know, fill in shifts and stuff. And this is also at the time where I started having a counter person, and the counter person was really the one doing the majority of the selling. And the counter person was getting really good at moving gold jewelry and things like that. But then the piercer who was piercing it to an expert level, like a high degree, like safe and professional, all that stuff, they were marking it on their sales sheet and being like, well, I'm the one who installed it and I'm the one who rang up the transaction. So obviously I'm the one who should get the commission. And then it turned into this whole thing of like, but like they did the work and now they're not getting their bonus.
Yeah.
You are. And then, so all of those things together made me sit down and I wrote out like, okay, this is all the income averaged out over this many days and this many hours. And I basically worked out like over the last year, on average, this is how much the piercers have made on a per hour basis compared to how much they've worked and how much they brought in. And then I basically just determined like, okay, I'm going to pay the piercing staff a flat hourly fee. And then if they do well or if they work for me for a while, like they'll get raises along the way. Like my piercers would get regular raises to the point where sometimes they were making great money in wages even before tips or anything like that. But I had to learn all those things kind of the hard way and over time, and it made me a much stronger business owner. But some of those lessons I learned along the way were like tough lessons to learn, because a lot of it's like driven by ethics and not
Yeah.
necessarily greed, but someone's personal financial gain. Sometimes a commission system might make them make decisions that aren't necessarily the best for the client. They're best for that person economically.
From experience as well, working on a commission can also make you make decisions that aren't always best for you, because I worked,
Right.
percentage based for years. And the thing about getting paid a percentage every day means that, the harder you work, the more you're rewarded.
Mhm.
And so you know that if you really push yourself as hard as you can every day, you're going to make more money, and you do. But it becomes less easy for you to take time off. I would go
Sure.
easily years without taking a holiday,
Same
like
for me.
literally
As a
years and
business
years.
owner, that's your life. It's like, how can I let myself take a day off when I know that if I went into work, I might make X amount of money? Like, and then you turn into that like addicted to work and constantly just grinding away. And
Yeah,
that can be great if you want to pay a mortgage, but it's terrible if you want to have a life.
it's but it's not always great for money managing though either, because you become accustomed to that immediate income, and it's, you know, the saying, easy come, easy go. You start to
Or,
have no value for what it is that you're doing. You're
yeah.
just constantly like running all the time. I mean, I've definitely had, you know, obviously less income the past year than ever because of the pandemic. But, you know, even um, going forward into the future, like that's not necessarily a work pattern I would make, you know, want to get back into. The benefits I would think of having just like a set wage would be that, you know, you don't try and crush in twice as much as you should every day. You don't fall to pieces every time, you know, you lose out on something, or you have to take some sick days, or, you know,
Right.
like you want to take a vacation or something like that. So like, I mean, I've kind of seen both sides of it a little bit, and I think that it all just comes down to like what you need and what's going to be healthy for you. I
Yeah.
mean, like when I was working on a percentage base, I never really worried. I could have a couple of days that would be quiet, but if I had like a family and children and commitments and things, that could be problematic. You know, like having to wait for the, you know, like the dam to kind of open and the work to start flowing again. Whereas, you know, like it wasn't a big issue for me, but someone in a different situation might really benefit from knowing I get paid this amount every month
Right.
on this day of the month that I can use to kind of run my household. So,
Well,
um,
I love to be able to do that for my staff
yeah,
because before, I remember when I had another piercer who's left my studio. Um, he was, I think he started with commission, and then he was there as we transitioned into wages, and there was such a thing as a 0 day, you know, where it would be like I sat there for 8 hours and made nothing, or made $15. I sold one can of aftercare, and then I sat there the rest of the day. Um, my piercer now, Evan, never has to worry about that. He knows I'm going to be there for X amount of hours, which means I'm going to make X amount of income because I get paid hourly. And then like the tips, you know, with American culture of tipping people in the service industry, that's basically just like he gets a bonus check, like
yeah,
essentially every week, based on how busy it is and how much work he puts in and the customer service level that he gives, which is great. But he needs to also know that like if something goes wrong and every single appointment that day cancels, you're still going to get paid. You're still going to be able to pay your bills. Now I'm in a point where I can also give some perks and benefits. Like I'm working on starting like a retirement matching plan. I give people paid vacation days now, and it's like I never would have been able to do that before. And I think switching over to an hourly system was good for me too, because it was better money management and it wasn't like feast or famine constantly.
yeah. I guess the thing to consider then would just be work out what it is that you need, what it is that you think that your time is worth as somebody that offers an expert service, and at least make sure that the person hiring you is okay with the possibility of that conversation taking place. Because if you ask, you know, is it okay if maybe annually we review this, and they say no, that would be kind of a bit of a red flag for me straight away. I would be like, you don't even know how I'm going to do. We could at least talk about it in a year, you know,
Mhm.
like, so if they're not even prepared to have that on the table, I mean, maybe you could come up to negotiate and they could say no to everything and give you the reasons why, you know, like they should at least be willing to have that conversation with you. And if they're not, that should be the biggest red flag of all, that they're not serious about you as an employee, or about their business.
Sure. Okay. I got to call it there because I got to go to work.
Rub it in,
Um,
why don't you?
mm, um, so to touch on it, Sunday, January 24th, educational day.
Yes.
I'll be starting off the day with a nipple piercing considerations presentation at 11 o'clock Eastern. Check your own local time zones. And then the star of the show will be Lola's presentations starting at 1 o'clock. If you want more information, check out Body Art Education by Ryan Ouellette on Facebook. You can see the event page. You can see the registration link. You can message Lola on social media. What's your social media and what's your email address that people can contact you via?
My social media is lola.slider, and my shop's social media is Forest Piercing.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great day. And just as a reminder, 100% of the funds just go to making sure that Forest Piercing can pay bills, can pay rent. So
Would be nice.
would be very nice. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for talking to me. I think your blanket looks really cool. I like your Roadhouse shirt, and your makeup looks very pretty.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to say?
I like your jumper.
Thank you. Got it in Scotland.
Really? I'm from
Yeah,
Scotland. That's so weird.
that's weird. My girlfriend lives there. Do you know her? Her name's Lola Slider. She's a famous body piercer.
Bit of a cunt.
Okay. All right. Thanks for recording with me.
Have a lovely day at work.
Bye. Oh, also, keep listening to the podcast because I'm going to edit in that social media thing that Lola will send me. Can you send that to me via email?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Hi everyone. I'm here at my studio, Forest Piercing, and I planned on coming in today and recording some footage for you, just kind of explaining a few different tips to avoid piercing flare-ups during lockdown. And obviously the announcement has just come through that Scotland's lockdown has been harshened and extended again. So I just wanted to take a moment just to talk to everybody that I know that's not just in the piercing industry, but in the close contact personal service industry. Obviously now that means that, basically 6 months so far out of 12, there have been forced closures for me working in Glasgow. Other parts of the country have been affected differently, but everyone has been affected really negatively in one way or another. So I just wanted to let you know that, I'm here and I feel what you're going through, and I don't know what's going to happen, but we're doing it. So moving swiftly on from that. Piercing flare-ups, what I mean by that is basically when your piercing just gets kind of angry. And rapidly that situation can become worse and worse depending on the actions that you take. So I wanted to share just a few bits of information with you as to try and avoid piercing flare-ups. Just what they are, how they happen, how to avoid them, to hopefully make the lockdown a little bit easier for you caring for your piercing. So the first thing that I'd like to mention is that most of the messages that I get about, like sudden onset problems with piercings are the result of an at-home jewelry change. So if it's possible for you not to change your jewelry, I know it's tempting during times of stress. I've said before, we all want to mess around with our appearance. It's a way of, reclaiming control. Look at me here with the new purple streak. We all want to just like play around with our image. It's fun, and it just helps us feel, like we're being creative and in control of our bodies. So I do understand there is a desire, oh, maybe I'll try and wear a ring in this, or maybe I'll try and change the head on this. Don't change your jewelry right now. It's a really, really bad time to experiment, because if something goes wrong, if you lose the connection, if you can't get your jewelry back in, if you have some kind of an allergic reaction to the new piece, if it's not bought from a trusted source, if you just can't get your jewelry back in, there's nothing that your piercer can do to help in that situation. So most of the kind of messages that I've had over the last couple of lockdowns have been about, well, I changed this, and ever since I changed it, I've been having these problems. So it's not super fun, but one of the easiest ways to avoid a kind of sudden flare-up with your piercing is to not change it right now. Secondly, don't sleep on your piercing. And that doesn't mean like don't sleep on your piercing. That means like literally don't sleep on your piercing. It's one of kind of the most common answers that we'll give when we see a piercing with what's called a pressure bump. It's like a little pimple, usually just on one point on your piercing, kind of on the side of it. And it's a pressure bump, as you would expect, is literally caused by pressure. Now, pressure can come from lots of different sources, but the most common is it being slept on. And again, something that I've been asked many times just over the years is, well, I keep sleeping on it, but is there anything else I can do? No, I'm not really. There's no amount of being really good with your piercing during the day that's going to compensate for it being slept on for like up to 8 hours a night. So either sleep on the other side, or just invest in a travel pillow. There's lots of different ways that you can adapt a travel pillow to try and just prevent the weight of your head from pressing on your piercing. This is particularly important for people who need downsizes done, but unfortunately can't have their piercing downsized due to the lockdown. Now your jewelry is going to be too long, and sleeping on it, as well as causing pressure bumps, can also cause migration. So don't sleep on your piercing. And also don't sleep on your piercing, Third, I would say aftercare must continue. So when we go into lockdown, our lives are basically thrown into disarray. Every part of our routine is just on its arse, basically. And so it's not at all surprising or unusual that people might stop cleaning their piercings, or, maybe like cut down dramatically on how they're cleaning their piercings, or, maybe just develop other problems. Like, for example, when you're used to getting up and going to work every day, you eat at certain times and you rest at certain times and you're exposed to certain elements, you go from living a relatively normal daily life to being in bed 18 hours a day, eating junk food and not drinking enough water. That's going to wreak havoc with your skin's oil balance, which can also be an issue. Because that's obviously a significant change to your skin. So it's really important that whilst all that's happening, you don't just suddenly like stop caring for your piercing. So try and keep that going, because stopping your aftercare combined with a massive change to your routine and a huge increase in stress, that is a recipe for a piercing flare-up right there. Fourth point that I have to share with you guys is just that most piercing flare-ups, and by flare-up I literally mean when your piercing just gets like red and sore and angry, and it can come out of nowhere, and it doesn't really seem to have any cause. It's just something that happens. Most piercing flare-ups are honestly just, you never know what causes them, or they're caused by things like stress and dehydration, or something topical that's gotten on the skin, or maybe you've scratched it in your sleep or something like that. They're often caused by like these little innocuous non-events, so it's not even like you can say, oh, it's caused by this. A lot of the time you never know what's caused it, and piercings that are years and years old, one day you can wake up, it's just a bit sore that day. And I know that's annoying, but one of the worst things that you can do is go online and try and find like an instant remedy for it. Honestly, the majority of piercing flare-ups, because they're caused by fleeting accidents or something topical, if you just revert to your original aftercare, practice that for a few days, don't sleep on it and drink lots of water, within a few days, like the vast majority of the time, it's going to settle itself down and just be normal again. And again, one of the kind of unnecessary complications that I'll see is people who have been like, well, it was a bit sore, so I went and did this crazy thing that I saw on Google, and now it's 10 times worse. So resist the temptation to try quick fixes and home remedies if you can, because it's amazing how often they blow up in your face. Finally, I would say easiest way to avoid a piercing flare-up is don't touch your piercing. It's boring, it seems like standard boilerplate advice, but like most standard boilerplate advice, it's also the most ignored piece of advice. People very often like to just kind of check on their piercing, whatever that means, just tap it, see if it's still there, see how it's feeling. But all of those little touches with your hands after you've been touching your phone and surfaces and door handles in your face and food and all that kind of stuff, that's what transfers harmful bacteria, and that's what's most likely to cause a piercing flare-up, as your body tries to just, basically reject whatever it is that's on the surface that it doesn't like. So please try your best not to touch your piercing if you don't need to, especially if it feels inflamed for any reason. And if you do have to handle your piercing, like for example, if you're performing essential aftercare, just wash your hands first with hot soapy water, and that's going to keep you safe. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching this video. Sorry if I'm a little bit flustered. Obviously, really, really bad news today for me, for a lot of people I care very much about. So that's going to take a little while to digest, but I hope this video helps, and see you on the other side.
Hey, it's Warhorse, and you should listen to the Piercing Wizard podcast with my buddy, Ryan, PBA. Also, you can find that thing anywhere out in the ocean, on iTunes, Apple, Spotify, whatever. Just remember, wear a mask or I'll roll your ass.